Jesus, it's so crowded in here. How the hell am I supposed to even walk?
The sphenodontid kind. Status, presumed extinct. No, they're extinct. Adult lengths, 2 to 18 feet. That's a lot of coverage for a kind. Representative shown, Dimetrodon. Though the family Sphenicodontidae is generally unfamiliar, not to people who study paleontology, of course, many people are acquainted with the kind's most impressive member, Dimetrodon. No, the most impressive member are the probanognaathids that are the double-jawed forms that were predicted. These are part of the reptile-mammal transition. Footnote required. Often associated with dinosaurs, not really, sphenacodonts were actually non-mammalian synapsids, also known as almost mammalian synapsids, being more similar to mammals, than dinosaurs or modern reptiles. Footnote required. The contents of coprolite, fossilized solid waste, also known as poo, and exchanged bite marks on the remains of Dimetrodon at a time when supposedly no animal was a carnivore, according to the creationist model, and the shark Xenocanthus indicate that they were feeding on each other. Xanthocanthus and Dimetrodon feeding on one another in the middle of the ocean, I'm not entirely sure. We need to have a footnote on that again.
Showing once again, we made stuff up.
The Cassiid kind. Status, presumed extinct. No, they're still extinct. Adult lengths, 3.9 to 14 feet. Representative shown, Cotylorhynchus. Cassiids were rather bizarre looking, with proportionally small heads, sprawling stances, and massive plant processing guts. As with all other non-mammalian synapsids, they are known only from rock layers deposited by the flood. That is because there was no flood and they are extinct. Cassiids laid eggs, but may not have been covered in overlapping scales like most reptiles. Footnote required. None of the work on Cassiids was done by creationists. One creationist did a baraminology study where he picked on the Cassiids because they are a minor player in the reptile-mammal transition. At no point are they telling their audience that they are part of the reptile-mammal transition. The idea that they might not have conventional scales is consistent with the fact that the synapsids eventually are developing skin integuments that eventually lead to the mammalian hair. We have an extensive fossil record on this, footnote required, for their display.
Some use of we made stuff up.
The Pariasaur kind. Status presumed extinct. No, they're extinct too. Adult length 2 to 9.8 feet. Representative shown, Scutosaurs. Pariasaurs looked similar to many non-mammalian synapsids, but like dinosaurs, they were true sauropsid reptiles. No, they're synapsid reptiles on the reptile-mammal transition, which you avoid discussing because it doesn't fit for creationist dogmas. Members of this kind, like Scutosaurus, were covered in protective bony armor called osteoderms. A recent study, not by any creationist, of the microscopic structure of Pariasaur bones has led some researchers, none of them creationists, to conclude that the animals were semi-aquatic. They pay attention to the biogeography of the animal and all of the relevant data to indicate that. None of this work has been done by creationists, except they do decide to steal this work parasitically for our display here. Footnote required.
Shawn? What the hell? Did you bolt? Fine. I'll do it. In other words, we made stuff up.
The osteodactylid kind, status presumed extinct. No, they're actually extinct. Adult wingspans 3 to 22 feet. That's quite a large range. Why are they including so many forms? Representative shown, specimen SMNKPAL 1136. How impersonal. Like the Dimetrodons a few cages away, pterosaurs are often associated with dinosaurs, but are classified in an entirely different group. None of this work was done by creationists. Nicknamed duck-billed pterosaurs for the shape of their beaks, it seems that these toothy flying reptiles tended toward a predatory lifestyle. None of that work was done by creationists. The figures in this cage are the first full-size reconstructions of a large, as yet unnamed osteodactylid species. Footnote required to list why they list this as a separate kind and are not related to any of the other fairy pterosaurs that are known during the Mesozoic. They are associated with dinosaurs because they lived during the same period, and some of them even overlap into the earliest birds, none of which, of course, makes sense in a creationist context where literally everything happens all at once. Footnote required.
And once again, they made stuff up.
Asdarchic kind, status presumed extinct. No, they're still extinct. Adult wingspans 3 to 22 feet. Ooh, that's again a suspiciously wide range. Representative shown, Quetzalcoatlus, achieving the height of a modern giraffe and maximum weight of 550 pounds, as darkids like Quetzalcoatlus northropi were the largest of all known flying creatures. Fossil footprints, ichnites, reveal that asdarchids typically walked on all fours with their fingers pointing out and backwards. None of this work has been done by creationist paleontologists because there are virtually no creationist paleontologists. As with other pterosaurs, the leading edge of the last half of their wings was formed by an elongated fourth finger. Pterodactyls mean wing finger, which they could have supplied, in addition to all the work done by the actual paleontologists like Unwin and others over the years, which have worked out an understanding of these creatures. We are looking at the tail end of the pterosaur reign, when they were being driven into more niche environments by the development of birds, which were taking place at the same time. The small birds made the small early pterosaurs less adaptive, and the very large gliding forms, which the birds could not compete with, become the dominant form. Many of these animals were probably quadrupedal. Even though they had large wings, they probably didn't fly much, precisely because they are at the outer range. They may have jumped off of cliffs to produce gliding elements, but most of them were actually ground-based predators, sort of flightless birds like giant emus. None of this information has been derived from creationist arguments, and of course, creationists think all of these animals were still alive at the time the Egyptians existed.
I'm not going to say it again. I'm not. Noah didn't need to bring any of these because there was no flood.
How did freshwater fish survive? After showing a picture of a completely implausible environment in which mosasaurs and dolphins exist in the same deposit, none actually exist, they put this text up as explanation. Skeptics, dun dun dun, often include marine animals in their attempts to show that the Ark could not house the required number of animals. Obviously, marine animals were not required on the Ark, but this raises an important question. How could freshwater fish survive the global flood? Freshwater and saltwater do not necessarily mix together. Duh! No freshwater layers may have existed within the global flood, allowing the freshwater creatures to survive. Furthermore, since the oceans became saltier every year, footnote required, the water during the flood would not have been as salty as today. You need to show that. Many fish, such as salmon, striped bass, and Atlantic sturgeon, live in both freshwater and saltwater during their lifetimes. In most families of fish, there are both freshwater and saltwater, just most varieties, which may imply that the original marine creatures were more capable of tolerating both types of water. Notice that when evolutionists use wiggle words like that, may and could have, that they get jumped on by creationists to accuse them of misrepresentation. But in the double standard world of young earth creationism, the requirement to actually document their arguments and be consistent is not required.
Here's something. They're spending an awful lot of time explaining how both freshwater and saltwater fish could have survived this fictional flood. Have any of them ever attempted to explain how merely being wet somehow made them guiltless? I mean, all the land animals needed the swift and severe justice of God visited upon them by virtue of guilt by association, but the fish, whales, and dolphins somehow escape scrutiny.